everyone, welcome back to my channel. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Christina Kent and I'm an oil painter based out of San Francisco. Today I'm going to be doing part 2 of my Q&A series. This part is going to cover questions about business and other stuff. If you are interested in part 1, that's where I cover the questions about painting, the painting process itself, and also the materials that I use. So if you're curious about that, be sure to check out that video that I will link. All right, let's get to the questions. Christine Phillips from Patreon asked, would you like to quit your day job at some point? Yeah, so I think it's a really good question. A lot of artists have a day job that helps support them. And for a lot of artists, I think they manage to keep a day job and still do art on the side, and that works for them. I think for me, I found that there's a lot of just projects and other things that I really want to do and ways that I want to explore with my art that it's really not enough for me to just have it on the side as a hobby. So my intention is to switch to art full-time ultimately. And so that's why I'm doing a lot of things, like taking a lot of steps to grow my art as a business and to find a way to make my art something that is able to sustain me and to help me make a living. Making art is not just a hobby for me, but it's really a calling. Painting has completely changed the way that I see the world, and I've realized that when I am creating art, I'm interacting with the world in a more loving and joyful way than I've ever felt before. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to communicate that joy and that love to other people through my paintings. At the same time, I'm really cognizant of the fact that I want to protect my creativity and I don't want to force it to make money for me before it's really ready and before my practice is really mature enough. So I think allowing it, giving it the time and the space to grow organically, as I mentioned in one of my other videos, and not just kind of forcing it to make a profit for me right away, I think that is a much better way to ensure that I will continue to have my practice grow and continue to protect my creativity without just pushing myself so hard that I get burned out and I eventually lose my passion. So for me, even though it means I have less time to create art right now, I am really thankful that I have a day job that is giving me the time and the space that I need to allow my creativity and allow my art to develop. Because I think about it as like with gardening, like you can't force a plant to grow faster by pulling on it. You really have to give the plants the nurturing that they need, the water, the sunlight, the nutrients, and then eventually over time those plants are going to bear fruit. So I kind of have a similar mindset with my art right now. I want to be patient and give it a chance to grow and give it a chance to gain its own momentum rather than forcing it to make money for me right away. But yes, definitely in the long term, I would love to do art full time. Like that is my dream. And I'm especially excited to be able to have just full days and full weeks in the studio where I could really work on larger scale pieces. I could work on series of large scale pieces that would just be so exciting. And also take more time to fill the well, to explore different ideas, because sometimes now I do feel like my time is so limited that I kind of rush from one idea to the next. And it would be really nice to allow ideas to develop a little bit more and also allow myself to explore ideas more in series rather than a lot of one-off pieces. But so those are some of the things that I'm really hoping for and that I would love to do once I switch to art full-time. In a similar vein, Richie Thompson asks, how can I make a living off selling and creating oil paintings? Yeah, so this ties in a little bit to my answer before. So far, I've been painting professionally and selling my paintings for about 2 years now. And while my revenue has been growing a lot, it's still not at the point where I could support myself off my art. So I think it does take a lot of time to build an art business, especially if you're self-taught and you don't have connections in the industry or anything like that. So I think it is possible. I don't know that many painters personally who are making a living just off of selling their paintings. One thing that I have noticed is that it seems like it seems like every artist kind of figures out how to support themselves in different ways. A lot of artists do teaching on the side. A lot of artists will do things like what I'm doing with content creation, so also supporting themselves through money that they get from YouTube or other like Instagram or TikTok. Patreon is a big thing for artists, and thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon. Like, that's a huge help in moving me in this direction. Because one of the other things, if you're going to make money from selling paintings alone, then that your income will be really cyclical over time. I've noticed, and then also from talking with other painters, that painting sales do follow cycles. And there are some months where I sell a lot of paintings and I do really well, and there are some months where I don't sell any paintings at all. So I think if you do want to make money just off of selling your paintings, it would be great you need to do a lot of financial planning so that you can smooth out those variations in earnings. But also I think it would be good, like for me, I'd like to get to a point where even in the months where I sell fewer paintings, I still sell enough to cover my rent so that I'm not really, I guess, suffering in those months. And that's where it can be really helpful to have other sources of income, like through teaching classes or revenue from YouTube or Patreon or things like that. But yeah, I guess the short answer to your question is I'm still figuring out how to make a living off of selling my paintings. And I'm kind of hoping, like, through this YouTube channel also, we can figure this out together, and I can share with you how I guess my art business is growing and the things that I'm learning along the way. Paolo Amorim 6650 asks, I'm curious about your thoughts on the day job versus art practice question. Obviously, you are more than just a hobbyist, but if I understand correctly, have not yet made the leap into full-time artist. How do you deal with the need to have two personas, none of which can easily be neglected? Yeah, so this is a really good question. I definitely feel like there is this sense of having two personas when it comes to my day job and my art practice. I think maybe for some artists, this isn't as big of a thing because they have jobs that are in the art world, like they're an art teacher or they are an animator. But my job is as an economics policy researcher. So it's like it's a very different sphere from drawing and painting. And it's kind of odd. So during the day while I'm at work, I'm really engaged in a lot of left-brained thinking. I'm doing very analytical tasks, very detail-oriented, thinking about like rigorous research strategies and designs, a lot of math, a lot of statistics. And then after work or before work, when I shift into this artist mindset, I'm kind of completely in a different world where I'm thinking about beauty and intuition and emotion and things like that. So it can be kind of strange and jarring to switch between those two personas. But at the same time, I also feel like I've heard of some friends who have jobs in the art world. They talk about kind of getting exhausted, like that their job takes the joy out of art. And then when they come home, they've been doing art stuff all day, but it's been kind of exhausting and they don't want to do additional art after their work. And so I think one of the cool things about having a job where I'm kind of in the left brain zone and this analytical thinking zone for so much of my time is that outside of that, I do feel like kind of bursting with creative ideas and creative energy. And I feel like so excited to just let my right brain, like creative side loose when it comes to creating art. And there are important ways in which the two sides play off of each other. Like I think in research, it's really important to have intuition and to be able to use this kind of other sense of knowledge to help guide your research questions, and then you can validate your intuition with data. At the same time, when I approach my art, when I approach painting, I like to bring this kind of researcher or scientist mentality, this like curiosity that the scientist has in wanting to really understand reality and question what they're seeing and question what comes at first glance. And I think that's sort of a scientific framework that that can inform my painting and help me make stronger work. And I talk about more how I balance these personas in a recent blog post. But kind of the gist of it is that when I was growing up, I was really immersed in this left brain style of thinking. to the point where I really devalued the right brain side of things, the intuition, emotion, beauty, that sort of thing. And it wasn't until more recently that I realized that, to be a full person, I need to integrate both of those ways of thinking. And it's not about, okay, now I'm shifting fully to the intuitive side and I'm going to throw out the rational side. I think it's more about figuring out, okay, how do I hold these two sides together and work with them simultaneously, to really live in an integrated way. But it's not always easy, and it's definitely like an ongoing process of learning for me. Amber Get a Hobby wrote, how do you get started showing in galleries, and do you have any advice for developing a relationship with them? Yeah, this is a great question, and I especially think like if you are a self-taught artist and you don't have connections in the art world, it can be super confusing at first. Like when I got into this, I had no idea what I was doing. And I think like there's also like so many scams out there that can get like target artists and stuff. So I think like it can be really intimidating and difficult to find the right opportunities for you, especially when you're just starting out. And I think this can vary by the country that you're in, or even the city or the state that you're in. So my experience might be a little specific to where I am. I'm in the US, in San Francisco, California. And so maybe take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, or just bear in mind that there could be differences across places. But so at the moment, I have worked with, I think 4 or 5 galleries now. Some have been more just one-off and some have been longer term relationships. I'm not represented by any gallery at the moment. I would love to be represented by a gallery, and I am actively working to get to a point where I do have gallery representation, because going back to one of the other questions, I think it would be really, really helpful if I could have a solo show on a regular basis and really get to show a large body of larger pieces. That would really help with the sustainability and growth of my art career. So that's kind of what I'm working towards, is getting gallery representation in a gallery that's a great fit for my work and that has a lot of enthusiastic collectors of my work. But in the meantime, of course, that doesn't usually happen right away, I guess, unless you're really lucky. And so the way that I started out is basically through open calls. So I signed up for a local arts organization in San Francisco called ArtSpan, and basically they just send out a newsletter every week or every month that has local art opportunities, and they include a lot of calls for artists. So a lot of galleries, what they'll do is they'll have the artists that they represent, who they show their work and they give them solo shows throughout the year. And then they'll also have shows that they call open calls, where they will make a call that's open to all artists, either in the area or who use a specific medium or something like that. And then anyone can apply to those open calls. So that's how I've gotten to work with the galleries that I've worked with so far. They submitted open calls, and then I sent my work into them, and those pieces were accepted. So I've been doing that with several different galleries and have had a decent amount of success with those. And then kind of the next stage after you do well in open calls is often, if the gallery really likes your work, if it does well in the open call, then they might invite you to an invite-only group show. And if you're invited to one of these invite-only group shows, then it's kind of a smaller collection of artists. Maybe you can feature more of your pieces there, or you can submit larger pieces. And then the idea there is that if you do well in these invite-only shows, then eventually you can progress to a solo show. So I'm at the stage where I've done really well in some of the open calls at shows, at some of the galleries in my area. And now I'm getting some invitations to these invite-only shows. And I'm hoping that I'll continue to do well and continue to grow these relationships with the galleries so that eventually I can get solo shows. And one other thing that I'll say is, so luckily in San Francisco, we do have a lot of galleries. And so I have found several galleries where I can show my work, which has been great. And so I have not submitted to any galleries that are outside of San Francisco, or outside of, I haven't submitted to any galleries where I would have to ship my paintings. So I will have a show this year that's a bit of a drive away. It's in Davis, which is about an hour to an hour and a half drive away. So I will have a show there, but so far I haven't submitted my work to any galleries where I'd have to ship my work out. And I think as my art career grows, I'll probably start doing that. So far I've found I really want to focus on cultivating relationships locally, partially because I just find that more fulfilling. I like to work with people in my local area. I like to be able to visit the gallery. I like to be able to chat with the gallerist. And I like to know that a lot of my collectors are going to be local as well. And especially for my work, which I do a lot of like cityscapes of San Francisco and views of my local neighborhood. So my work is also very, it does have a strong local feeling to it. And I think some of my paintings will appeal to people who've lived in the city for a really long time. So I think for all of those reasons, I've focused mostly on galleries that are in my area. But I would say, if you don't live in an area with a lot of galleries, then you definitely don't have to do this. You can reach out to galleries that are in other cities, and you can try to form relationships that way. The only thing that I would say is if you are going the route of working with galleries that are not close to you, just do your due diligence. Maybe try to talk with some of the artists who work with those galleries to see their experience, and make sure it's not just a big scam, because I do see galleries that ask for artists to submit work, and often they charge for you to even submit your work, and they're asking for artists all over the country to submit work. And I just can't imagine that your chance of getting into one of those galleries would be very high if they're just casting such a wide net. And I think all the galleries that I've worked with so far, they have not charged a fee to apply to any of these shows. So that kind of gave me a signal that they're legit. They also only accept local artists. So they're like focusing on this smaller net. I've spoken with artists who work with them, and those artists were extremely happy with their experience. So all of that kind of helped me feel confident that the galleries that I was working with were legitimate. I would also add to really try to build and leverage your network. I mean, it sounds like not fun business stuff, but like make art friends, make friends who are artists, which will be just great for your practice and mental health anyway. And then talk with them about where they're showing and what galleries they like, and you know, how they've managed to get shows. And then through them, maybe if they really like your work, like recently I got invited to do a show, and it was because a friend of mine recommended me for that show. So I think, you know, as in all business, a lot of career success and business success can depend on who knows you and who's aware of your work. And referrals, like getting referrals from other artists or from collectors, things like that. All of these things can be really important. So yeah, I think if you think of it as networking, then it's not so fun. But if you think of it as just making art friends and getting more involved in the art community, then it's just a really positive thing that can also be really helpful for your career. MCVA asks, I would like to know how to price paintings. Where I live, people don't appreciate the effort put into a painting. Yeah, this is a really tricky question, especially when you're just starting out and you're not sure about the market for your paintings. The strategy that I went with was to kind of start low and then increase my prices over time. Partially because, yeah, I just really wasn't sure what the market for my paintings was. And so I wanted to, and I had a lot of paintings that I really wanted to sell. So it wasn't like I only had just a few paintings and I really wanted to get the right price for them. It was, no, I was doing these daily paintings, and if I didn't sell them, then they would just be sitting in my closet. And for me, I really like to place my paintings. So I was fine to sell my paintings at a lower price if it meant that they would find a buyer faster. Now, I think if you're in a different situation, like I said, if you have only a few paintings that are just really, really special to you, maybe you wouldn't want to go with this strategy. Maybe instead you would want to set your price really high and then just wait for the right collector to finally come along. I think it's important Well, I mean, the first important thing is to be able to pay the bills. So if you can't pay rent, then I think your hands are kind of tied. But if you do have the ability to wait for the right collector to come along, I think it's important that you set your prices so that you're not going to feel sad or cheated when you sell the painting. Like, I think it's important that you feel good about the sale and the collector feels good about the sale. But yeah, like I said, I started selling my paintings pretty low because my priority was to sell them rather than to wait for someone to come and buy them at a higher price. And I set that painting, I initially started selling my paintings on Etsy about 2 years ago. And so I set the price similar to other paintings of a similar quality and skill level and style that I was seeing on Etsy. So I kind of just looked at the market to see what paintings were being sold and for what prices. That being said, the price that I was selling my paintings for was far below a price that would sustain my living expenses and allow me to do art full time and pay my rent. So I knew that selling them at those low prices wouldn't be sustainable. So gradually over time, I've been increasing my prices. And that's kind of been increasing in tandem with my audience. So even though my prices have been going up, my art sales have continued to go up as well. And once you start working with galleries, then they'll have input on the prices that you set. So when I started working with galleries in my area, they really immediately pushed me to increase my prices even more, which is also important if you're working with galleries because they're going to be taking a commission from the work that they sell. So even if maybe a price was working for you online, it might not work for you when you're only getting half of that from the gallery. The benefit of the gallery is that, at least in my experience, the galleries have been really effective in selling my work. So a piece that maybe would sit on my website for several months would sell immediately once it was in the gallery. Here also is where I think the internet is really such an incredible thing, because you were mentioning that where you live locally, they're not willing to pay a high price for a painting. And so I think it's really great that we have these marketplaces like Etsy, or you can just set up your own website and start selling your paintings through your website, because maybe where you live locally, people don't have the appreciation for art or don't have the money to support like a living wage for artists. But if you open yourself to the entire global market, then chances are over time, with time and effort, you can find your audience, you can find your collectors around the world. And now that's really what's happened with me. Like so many of my paintings that I sell online, the vast majority of them are not going even to people in California. They're going all over the United States. They're going to different countries. They're really just going all over. So I would say set prices that you're comfortable with, that you're proud of, and then go out and find the audience, find the fans who are going to really appreciate your work, whether they live in your hometown or they live in a different state or they live in an entirely different country. Christine Phillips from Patreon asks, do you have other crafty hobby things that you like to do? Yeah, so honestly, like between the day job and trying to do art and grow an art business, I really don't have time for anything else. But hopefully when I can do art full time, I would love to do some other hobbies like I think pottery would be really, really fun. Sculpture would be cool. Things definitely like other things with my hands where I'm making things would be great. And I think it would be cool to do something in 3 dimensions rather than just 2D. Also maybe like fashion design, getting into like different clothing designs would be something I think that would be really exciting. I would love to hear in the comments if you have hobbies that complement your art practice. Lol Art says, simple question. Do you keep all your art or do you throw a lot in the bin regularly? We heard a lot of people say keep all your art, but if I keep all my art, I will have no place for living in my home at some point. This is a great question, and being in San Francisco, I totally feel you. The apartments here are tiny. We have like no space. I have my studio kind of shoved into this corner of my room, and that's about like all the space I get. So I do think about ways to save space when I'm making my art, and I think about things like storage. I don't keep all of my art, so I do I would say I keep most of it, but oftentimes I'll be working on a painting, and I do alla prima, so my paintings, they stay wet for a really long time. So if I'm working on a painting and I really just feel like it's not going anywhere, then I'll oftentimes just wipe it down and leave kind of the canvas blank for the next try. But I would say I actually only do that with very few paintings. Most of them I do like to bring to completion, because I do agree, like, yeah, I don't think you need to keep all your work, but I think it's great to keep the paintings that worked, but also the paintings that maybe didn't work. And I think there's this part of like, kind of like documenting your learning process where it's helpful to see the paintings that kind of failed. It's also really cool when you're learning, because then you can see how much your art is growing over time and how much your skill is improving over time. And oftentimes, like as I mentioned in the Make Bad Art video, there's a lot of things that you can learn even from bad paintings. So while maybe the overall painting failed, maybe there is something that you really like in a brush stroke in one area or the colors that you used in another. So I guess I do err on the side of keeping most of my art, but it's a lot easier for me because usually the art that I'm making is really small and it's on surfaces that are really easy to store. So I paint a lot on flat ampersand gesso board panels, these like flat hardboard panels that are like, they're really thin. So after I finish the paintings, I can just stack them up and they actually don't take up that much space. I could probably fit like hundreds of them in my closet if I needed to. I also paint on Arches oil paper. So, I mean, that's just like thin paper. So you could do tons and tons of paintings and keep all of them, the good and the bad, and it wouldn't take up too much space. I really recommend while you're learning to work on these surfaces, especially something like oil paper, which is really cheap too, so you don't get precious about it, and then you can, you're not scared to make a bad painting because you don't feel like you're wasting this surface or that you'll need to find a place to store it. And then gradually over time, you can work on bigger canvases like the one I have behind me, but that's more of in the long run. I think when you're learning and you're starting out and you're kind of less certain about what you're working on or maybe your skills, I think it's best to just focus on like working on these surfaces that are easy to store. So if you do want to keep the sketches, if you do want to keep the failures, then it's easy to do that. Art and Imagine asks, have you ever been to the Louvre in Paris or Florence in Italy? No, I have not been there yet, and I am dying to go. I am actually really excited because I'm going to be going to Italy this spring, so I am just like super excited about that, and I just can't wait to see all of the art and all of the art history that Italy has to offer. I have not been to Paris either, but it's definitely on my list. I would love to go to all of these amazing art museums and immerse myself in art history, and especially like sketch or even paint directly from some of these like old masterpieces. I just think it's so cool how through museums we can connect with all of these paintings from the past and the great painters from the past. So it's definitely something that I really want to do. It's definitely in my future, hopefully soon. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thanks to everyone who submitted your questions. It was so great and super fun to answer all of them and to see what you guys were interested in and to hopefully share my knowledge and my experience. I hope you guys found this helpful. Let me know what you thought of this video in the comments. And thank you so much to my supporters on Patreon. You guys are seriously the best, and I am so thankful for your support of my art. If you like my videos, if you like my art, and you want to help me make more, consider joining my Patreon at the link below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.